Our conversation for today centers on agricultural development, and just recently the federal government launched 100,000 tons of silos, and of course the federal government also set aside 50 billion naira for agricultural mechanization. That's what is going to form our conversation for today. And I have here with me an agricultural economist from the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Professor Bola Okuneye. Professor, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
100,000 metric tons of silos. Now, do you see this really helping us achieve food security in the country?
Well, in the first place, food security will mean that we have sufficient food as at when needed and of high quality. 100,000 metric tons vis-a-vis the 250,000 metric tons that we had before, that gives us about 350,000 metric tons. The issue is not that it will not help, of course it will, but it's not that it should be the ultimate. If you look at the Nigerian situation, most of these various silos are either in Abuja side or Kaduna side, but we need this to be well distributed across the geopolitical zones. The vice president was saying that, and I hope they can implement that. If that one is done, then we are saying that during the dry season, they can then fall back to the stored products. But silos are basically meant for grains and few pulses. Mm-hmm. And therefore, that would not really ensure complete food security, because we still have for yams, for cassava, and all those things, you know. But it will go a long way towards minimizing food shortages in the country.
Right. Just as the minister mentioned, high cost of land.
Yes.
We know that land is very important when you talk about achieving food security, and we know that Africa as a continent, particularly Nigeria, we've got a lot of lands, but are we really making proper use of it?
Of course we are not. Out of the cultivatable land that we have, we've only been using between 39 and 40% of the cultivatable land, and the issue of land clearing, land preparation are key towards making land to be available for production. But more so, the issue of land tenure is also key, in the sense that in the south, particularly in the southwest, southeast, and the south-south, we have rigidities in terms of the land tenure system. Of course, land is there, but you can't just go there just to acquire it or produce with it. And therefore, we can only say that we should have complementary policies and programs that will release land for us to now have proper agri-mechanization to take place. It's a first step to have the various equipment, but the next step should be mobilizing the various communities, the various community leaders, the various landowners, to release land for production. In the north, it's not as difficult. Of course, land in the north, you can easily get so much land if you are so much interested, if you follow certain institutions. But the various institutions that are needed to be approached in the south have not really been properly mobilized and sensitized towards this. And therefore, the next step should be that the government should now put in place some structures that will sensitize the various institutions, particularly the communal institutions that can release land for the equipment now to be used on the land. And various other basic institutions that have large land, like various universities, they have so much land, and yet maybe only 20–30% of the land are being used. So this type of mechanization can also be introduced there, and they can follow up. They can have proper record, and so they can have increased level of production, now, which can assist in food security.
All right. So in all of this, what is the role of the state government?
The state government is key. Fortunately, the issue of agriculture is both for the state, for the local, and for the federal. I I assume that there is no state government that the federal government will approach that, okay, we are going to release some tractors to you, that will say no. And so the state government too, they need to mobilize the various local governments. We've always been saying that, that some local governments that have land should really set aside some areas of land, 200, 300 hectares of land, so that people can now be interested in producing. And that's when the various tractors can really be used there. Otherwise, the tractors will just be lying fallow without being utilized. Of course, we also have on record, there are some politicians that normally corner such tractors. And we now need to really make sure that the various tractors are made available to the farmers that want to use them and to possible new investors that want to go to agriculture.
All right. Now, we realize that the agricultural sector is dominated by, peasant farmers. There are not many commercial farming. So who are eligible to access this? They just set aside 50 billion for this mechanization you're talking about.
Yes.
Who are those eligible to access this fund?
Oh, I think that the 50, if I understand the government very well, the 50 billion naira set aside is not to be distributed to farmers, but to ensure that we have prototypes, tractors, and machines and implements to be made available. And this is where the National Center for Agri-Mechanization based in Ilorin is key. Fortunately, Nigerian Stock Products Research Institute is also in Ilorin, so they can easily come together, talk about, how do we build small-scale storages, stored facilities. How do we build small-scale implements that these small-scale farmers can use? Of course, it's also important that the small-scale farmers, they need really to come together as cooperatives, as group farms. That's when they can now enjoy the economies of scale in the production of their various farming
No, but for
enterprises.
those of you in the university, for those of you who have done a lot of research, in agriculture, what have you done really in bringing these peasant farmers, together?
Oh, well, the basic thing that we have been doing is that we've been sensitizing farmers towards having their contiguous land pulled together. Because most farmers, peasant farmers, they normally produce less than 0.5 hectare of land in the south and about 1 to 1.5 hectares of land in the north. So we've been encouraging them through the extension system. Come together, pull your land together. Set aside a particular land that we are going to devote for commercial farming, even though they can still have their own small-scale plots, small plots for their own food production for the family. So it's when this is achieved, and we've been making progress in this area, particularly in the southwest as well as in the southeast. Not much progress has really been made in the south-south, but if you look at them pulling together their various land in communal form, then large areas of land will be available, and therefore they can now plow, they can now do the ridging, and therefore they can enjoy the benefits of the various agri-mechanization programs of the federal government.
All right, let me take you back again to the issue of the silos, 100,000. Would you compare, it to what is obtainable in other countries in terms of adequate reserves?
Well, in many developing countries, we don't have as much as 350,000 metric tons in many developing countries.
So Nigeria is doing very well.
Nigeria is doing great. But in some, if you look at Brazil, if you look at India, if you look at China, of course, they'll be doing better than us. But this really a major progress being made from 250 now to 350,000 metric tons. But we can still go more. And the point that should be stressed, of course, is we don't need too much of these large silos. What we need are the small-scale ones that can be that are off-farm storage facilities for farmers, so that we don't need to take so much grains or so much pulses down to Abuja or Kaduna to store. We can store at the state level, we can store at the local government level, we can even store at community levels. And they need to invent small-scale ones, which farmers will say, I can easily rush down over there, people will buy from me, and I will store there. And when people now are crying for more, they can then be released to them, rather than be releasing them all the way from Kaduna or Abuja to people in Imekuku, or to people in Ijebu-Igbo, or to people in some suburb areas. So we need to now to go lower. Look at the lower form, the smaller form of the storage facilities, and not the gigantic silos that we have now.